All right, so now I've got it set up. I'm ready for the bulk of my painting. And when I finish this, the only layers that will matter are the layers I start creating now. So I have a flat color layer here, which is floating on nothing. So I have a locked white background behind. I have my basic shapes and my template above as a multiply layer at a low opacity. And I'm going to lock that layer so I can't accidentally paint on that layer. And when I'm done, it will all be turned off, but this is just helping me know where to paint. And then I may or may not be able to make use of my sketch layer, but right now it's underneath everything else. And I want it turned off, I think, for the moment, so I can build up based on what I see. So the only tool I'm going to have selected is the brush tool, and I'm going to keep it at 100% opacity for this entire layer, this flat color layer. Maybe I'll mark that red so I know where I am. But I'm going to use the space bar to move around, click and drag, especially when I'm zoomed in. I'm going to use Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out. Remember these helpful shortcuts? I can do those same things on my reference here. If I want to zoom into her eye, for instance, I can arrange the space to be a little bit more helpful, give my reference a little bit more space. And I'm going to be stealing colors just by holding down the Option button. And I have my dropper tool set to sample from the current layer. So that way I'll steal directly from the colors I'm painting. All right, so let's continue with the flat color painting. I can be a little bit more particular about how I place things. I'm not getting lost in detail yet, but I am kind of mapping out where everything's going to go. And every once in a while I might turn off that sketch layer and just see. So I already have kind of her eye and her highlight put in there. And now I can frame around that a little bit. And get that shape to her eye. Even though it's a little exaggerated, that's okay. And now, what about the mascara, the eyelashes, the smudginess, right? I can kind of put that in. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. Now, what a lot of caricature artists will do, especially on this flat color layer, is they'll start to build a palette off to the side of colors they want to use. And that is very helpful. And I can create my own kind of in-betweens if I'm not happy with what I'm getting. I can take the opacity down and I can create variations. All right. We get a little bit of that yellow in there. And create variations for highlight colors. And now for this brush, I want to paint at 100% opacity. It's on the layers above my flat color layer where I might want to get a little bit transparent and more worried about special effects and kind of textures. We have a nice high hairline You see how it gets kind of pink right next to it? These colors are going to feel dark at first because they're surrounded just by pure white. And that's why I create a palette off to the side that I can use. I can also take that color and at any time, it's kind of like mixing makeup, I can add more pink to it, more red to it. She has eyeshadow on. If I want something in between that, I might take down the opacity and then steal that eyeshadow color. And go back to 100% opacity, paint with it. So I'm not going for finish, I'm going for choosing my battles and sketching them in the right places. And it's not so important to get the details right, it's important to get the placement right. She has a very shockingly bright lipstick. So I might play with that a little bit and then make my own version. And my goal to caricature, I don't usually know from the beginning how finished I want them to look. But what you want to do as you're working on them is kind of take them all up, take everything you're working on up to a similar level. What is going on? So that you can decide really at any time what level is a good finish level. I'm not one that likes to do a digital painting to death until it looks hyper realistic, because I think you lose a lot of the personality of the work that way. I don't want it to look like a photo at the end. I want it to look like my own drawing, my own painting, my own work. But it also depends a lot on the subject matter and how finished I feel that needs to be, depending on who I'm doing. Right. So maybe this is pretty blocky. It's looking like pastel with this brush that I'm using. This custom brush. But maybe once I get it all kind of blocked in, that's pretty close to the finish I want. And then I'll just work on some edges and a few select details without ever having to use another brush. I don't know yet. But what I'm not going to do, which is a common mistake, is to like zoom in on the eye and finish that off to exquisite detail, and then just assume that everything else should be treated in the same way, given enough time. Now, when you are doing eyes, make sure that they're lining up together. The eyes are the focal points of the head. And if there's anything kind of weird about them, we will definitely pick up on it as the viewer. So I recommend kind of starting it pretty smudgy like that and then sharpening it finding the right placement, the right shape. Needs to go a little higher. Some caricature artists I know like to outline the eyes and the nose in red to kind of show the blood flow. But in this case, like, you don't see a lot of that natural blood flow under the skin because there's so much makeup. But that can be a helpful tip sometimes. And this eye is feeling a little high, so I'm going to draw it down a little bit. Try to show that inside sharpness. Again, I'm using a pretty big brush, but this allows me, because I have shape dynamics on, if I just touch really lightly, I can kind of draw across it. I can erase out. I can brighten, make it work. And you'll find by doing this too that the whites of the eye are not in fact white, and they shouldn't be. The teeth are not in fact white, and they shouldn't be. Everything gets knocked back a little bit to be more believable. And yet I'll make them brighter than they are in the photo so that they show up. And the teeth, I'm not going to outline each tooth. I'm simply going to show a little bit of shadow between the teeth to start with, right? Right, you can tell how different this is than digital coloring because I'm not just painting one local color in. I'm really exploring all the different values and temperatures of her skin tone. And I am not working behind an outline, I'm working just underneath a sketch or over the top of a sketch if it's traditional painting. But this is full spectrum coloring without any outline, and that's digital painting. So they are distinct, different disciplines. Okay, the jawline is going to be pretty important here. So I want to draw that shadow in. The shape of that neck coming out. Okay, so something like that. Now I can turn on my sketch layer underneath and I can steal colors from that if I want. You see how that helps knock back the eyes and knock back the little highlights that I didn't fill in, so that's helpful. But my jaw is much more defined. Let's see. But I need to define it better on this side.